Hello, I'm Dr. Terry Susan Fine, Content Specialist for the Florida Joint Center for Citizenship, which is part of the School of Politics, Security, and International Affairs at the University of Central Florida in Orlando. Welcome to our Middle School Civics Highlights series. We're going to be focusing on Benchmark 1.8, in which we explain the purpose of the preamble to the U.S. Constitution. In Part 2, we focus on what are the goals and purposes of government included in the preamble to the U.S. Constitution. We're going to be identifying the goals and purposes of the national government as set forth in the preamble to the U.S. Constitution, such as to form a more perfect union, to establish justice, to ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. What are we going to do? We're going to dissect the preamble. We are going to treat each of these phrases as if it's an individual goal or an individual purpose for forming the new government. So as we dissect the preamble, we're also going to be looking at why was this phrase important? Why was it that this phrase was so important that it had to have its own sort of separation from all the other phrases? What did it accomplish? What did it mean to accomplish? So let's look at the first of these phrases, to form a more perfect union. The Articles of Confederation had worked well to a point, and the Articles of Confederation were the best way that they could be when we talk about who created the Articles of Confederation and why they were created. It was the colonists who created the Articles of Confederation, who were newly independent. And so they were forming this union in response to an abusive king who was thousands of miles away, who had sole control over how they were treated. So by creating this decentralized government, they were able to say, we want government close to the people. And so their idea was perfect, but they also understood after a few years that this new system was perhaps not as perfect as it could be. So here the Constitution was intended to be more perfect, to form a more perfect union. To establish justice. To establish justice ensured that the government would be just, would follow the rule of law, and to treat the law as supreme. The people wanted a level playing field where the courts were established with uniformity. The people wanted the fair and equal treatment so that if people were accused of crimes, if there was some kind of a conflict between two states that had to be adjudicated, they wanted there to be a court system that would treat the people fairly and equally and would follow the rule of law, recognizing that the law is supreme. To ensure domestic tranquility. The purpose of this phrase was to protect the citizens from internal conflict, which would create instability. The Articles of Confederation, the governments under the Articles of Confederation, had this experience with Shays' Rebellion, which took place between 1786 and 1787. Shays' Rebellion demonstrated the need for a national government. And by having a national government that could enforce the laws, and there could be national laws relating to, in the case of Shays' Rebellion, relating to taxes and having a national armed forces, that the national government could then respond to domestic issues that were creating conflict within the state, such as in the state of Massachusetts with Shays' Rebellion. to provide for the common defense. It was important that the government was able to protect citizens from external attacks, as no one state was really capable of fending off an attack from land or sea on its own. So consider Article 4 of the U.S. Constitution, where it says, "The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government, and shall protect each of them against invasion." So that means that every state was guaranteed a representative form of government, and here's a commitment that the national government will protect each state against invasion. There would be no favoritism, that if the state of Georgia was attacked by an outside entity, that they would not be protected, but if the state of New York was attacked, then the state of New York would be protected. This simply wasn't going to happen, because the purpose of the preamble was to say the government will be structured to provide for the common defense. And that way the citizens are protected from external attacks. No one state could really defend itself from an attack, and therefore the national government would come to the aid and comfort of the source of the attack, even though that attack might be on one state versus all the states. We know, for example, that all those coastal states were very vulnerable to attacks, but some of the states were more vulnerable than others. The state of New York was particularly vulnerable because it had a port, as did the state of Massachusetts. So by having a port and having a large city that was built around that port, that meant that there was a lot of trade, a lot of ships coming in and out with goods and so on. And so that meant that there would be more vulnerability to invasion, and then more people who could be hurt because of the cities that surrounded those ports that were there because of the port and all the business and commerce that the port created. To promote the general welfare, the government focuses on the public interest. The purpose of having tranquility, justice, and defense is to promote the general welfare, which reinforces the concept of we the people. So by promoting the general welfare, the government is protecting the public interest, which can take many forms that have already been introduced in the preamble to the U.S. Constitution. To secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity. The public interest is intended to work to the people's benefit and not to their detriment, not just now, but for forever, to secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves, for the people who are writing, but our posterity, for our children and their children's children, and for all the generations to come. So that's another purpose of that preamble, is to say we don't want just ourselves to be taken care of. We also want to write a constitution that will ensure the security of this country, the blessings of liberty, long into the future. Do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. This excerpt finishes the we the people approach. It gives the document and the nation a name. We do ordain. We the people ordain and establish this Constitution. And it summarizes the preamble, right? The goals and purposes of government are going to be found in the Constitution that we are establishing. The people themselves are the higher power. This phrase in particular replaces the Articles of Confederation and creates one national government. Thank you for joining me for Middle School Civics Highlights. Do you still have questions? Please contact us using the information that appears on the screen. Till next time, I'm Dr. Terry Susan Fine. Thank you for joining me.